Now that we have created our factory service, it's time to create our controller. Now, controllers are responsible for managing the specific view. In our case, we only have one view, which is basically our index page, a single page application. If you had several different pages, several different views, then you would use different controller for a different view. But because we only use one, we only going to have one controller. I'm just going to collapse this factory here. And on a new line, I'm going to start with dot controller. And the name of our controller will be shopping list controller. After the name of the controller, we're going to start with the function. And now we are going to define dependencies. This is where I was talking about this injecting of our services or any other dependencies which could be injected directly into our module. The first service which we're going to be using is scope. Now, scope allows us to communicate between a controller and our view, which is basically the structure of our index page. What it does, it allows us to basically change the values directly on specific field, and it's actually using two-way binding. Let's say on our page we have a text field. We type something into this text field, and that automatically updates the code within this controller. The same happens the other way around. If we change the value within the controller, it automatically is reflected on the page in our view. So this is the scope, basically, our link between the page and the code. Next one is HTTP. This service will allow us to use Ajax, create Ajax code. It's not just for internal, but you can also use it for the external calls. Then we're going to use log, which is basically allowing us to log any messages, any errors to the console. Then we go for helper factory. As you can see, this is where we're actually using our service early created, and we're passing it to our controller. Now, after this, all these parameters have been specified, two curly brackets, and inside of this controller, we are going to start by specifying the URLs which we're going to be calling based on what method has been executed. We're going to start with var URL insert, and that is going to go to mod folder insert.php, then semicolon, var URL select equals mod select.php, semicolon, var URL update, and again mod update.php, and var URL remove equals mod remove.php. After this, we are going to create two constants, so var max underscore length, which will be 50 characters, and then var min length, which will be 2 characters. Now, one thing to understand about this is obviously JavaScript does not really have anything like constants. Just for our own comfort, we put these variables in capital letters to indicate, hey, this one won't ever change. This is the static value, and that doesn't change as variable, which you obviously can overwrite and so on. Now, as far as this code would work absolutely fine, now one problem with this approach is obviously these two constants are only available to this specific controller. And let's say if we ever use this module with any other module basically which is dependent on this one and would need to use these constants as well, or let's say our factory would need these constants, any of the services we have inside of our module would need these constants, then obviously that's not going to be possible. In order to make it a little bit more flexible, what we can do is actually to define two constants directly on the module. So after our module definition, we're going to create constant, and we now put the name of this constant in between quotes, and then the value associated with it. This one has 50 characters, then the next constant, which was minimum length. Let me just copy and paste it here, and obviously the value is 2. And now if you wanted to use these constants inside of this factory service, we could do this. We can use it inside of our controller. We could also use any other module, which would depend on this my app module as well. Now, in order for us to have these two available inside of the controller, we simply need to add them to our arguments here. So max length and then minimum length. Now we can remove these two because they are already obviously available to us because of this injection here, dependency injection. Okay, so now that we have all this ready, let's move to the next video.